Putin admits heavy losses of the Russian forces in an interview, while aid is coming and additional aid is being pledged towards Ukraine. We'll talk about this as well as about the developments along the front line, where the Russians keep gaining ground despite successful Ukrainian counterattacks in other positions. We'll talk about them as well as about the troop generation by both sides and a lot of additional things in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Hello and welcome. Ukraine's energy capacity to produce electricity has now shrunk to lower than 20 gigawatts. They began the war with 55 gigawatts to have a comparison. The rest, so everything beyond the 20 gigawatts, is destroyed, damaged, or captured by the Russians. The air attacks by both sides are continuing. Ukraine strikes back with drones. We have an example here of drones striking the airfield in Mastok, that is in North Ossetia. That's down here. Another air attack on an airfield by the Ukrainians. On this airfield, MiG-31 and Tupolev 22s are stationed. I have no confirmation of that this attack was successful. I have no proof that anything was destroyed. The GUR, the Ukrainian military intelligence, is saying there are troop generations in Kryvyi, which is up here. We have no details about this. Zelensky already said in the past that he expects another attack northwest of Kharkiv, which would be more or less this region here. And we had Budanov also saying that soon there would be an attack, but this attack didn't materialize. So unclear what is going on there in this regard. We have Ukrainian counterattacks here on the western break into the front line, at the, let's call it the first bridgehead into Ukraine. Here, a Ukrainian IFV attacked towards the Russian positions, and it was geolocalized directly at the outskirts of the town right here, but this is not proof of the Ukrainians recapturing the town. From the video I see, he's just passing by and pounding Russian positions inside of town, so no proof that this led to any occupation of fresh territory in this region. Further to the east, we have Russian advances, visual evidence of Russian advances here in Staritsia. The Russians were spotted in the north of the center of town, let's call it this way, roughly here. So the red line should probably move down here. We see that they keep advancing in this area, but it has slowed down massively. In Vovchansk itself, the Ukrainians seem to have had successful counterattacks once again. The German journalist Julian Röpke once again geolocalized that the Ukrainians, according to him, recaptured these areas. That would be more or less this here. So a significant setback for the Russians in their attempt to capture Vovchansk. To the east, on the eastern front, we have the Ukrainians losing the town of Ivanivka. Basically, all of this has fallen to the Russians over the last few days, and we have a geolocalization even further to the west. This is up here, Ivanivka, you see here. So this is roughly here. The Russians have reached now, and showing that they keep pushing in this area, that they managed to push the Ukrainians further away. No additional changes north of the Seversky Donetsk, so we switch to the south, and here the fighting is continuing both in Bilohorivka as well as in Chasiv Yar. Now from Bilohorivka we have fresh geolocalization, and that is a little bit confusing again, because we see the Russians being pounded right here east of the quarry. But that's a region where we have seen them before. No proof that they have re-entered, how they entered the town, so the situation is still somewhat confused. I have shown you that they had raised the flag inside of Bilohorivka, but it seems they were pushed back, because since then we have not seen any additional footage, anything that proves any change here. So I guess Bilohorivka is still under Ukrainian control. I can't fully prove it though, so there's a question mark from my side over the situation here. We have the Russians advancing at Chasiv. There we have visual evidence. They entered Kalinivka. I've shown you in the last situation report that they crossed the canal here, but supposedly were destroyed in this attack, even though I do not have visual evidence. But we have visual evidence of them being in here. So they have taken half of Kalinivka, more or less until here. They have definitely advanced and taken positions. South of it, we have the Russians entering Chasiv Yar. This is here in the northeast. So far they have been up here. Now we see them in here, but this is continuing because the Russians have not just gained this and the southern part. We have visual evidence of them being in the center of the canal district, which is this one here. So the Russians have now advanced up to here. They are raising a flag in this building, which is, the video of it is in the Telegram channel, which you can find in the description, where I put videos that I can't show to you here because YouTube wouldn't be too happy if I show them to you. Other than that, so while the Russians keep advancing here in central Chasiv Yar, they've also managed to advance further to the west here. We have visual evidence of this as well. Here they've reached the area where the canal is underground. So more or less here, the Russians are now as well. They keep up the pressure at Chasiv Yar and slowly gain additional grounds. Further southeast, we have a small change, barely any, where we have to question whether the maps have even been accurate. Now at Andrivka here, the Russians were basically spotted here. So if this is an actual advance, then it's won by 50 to 100 meters. Not really much to prove, but we see that there is some change here. You see the geolocalization is roughly 1/3 into that tree line. So more or less up till here, not really much to show here. We switch down to Avdiivka. Here we have a straightening of the front line between Novo Alexandrivka and Arkhangelsk. Here the Russians have taken all this area and occupied it now. It was likely that it was already vacated by the Ukrainians, as otherwise they would have been under threat of being cut off. So, but now we have visual evidence of the Russians having occupied it. From Sokil, there is a video again in the Telegram channel where a M2 Bradley and a Russian BTR-82 have a close range firefight insanely. Like the distance is at times at 3 to 5 meters maybe. They pass by at extremely close range. It's some parts of it are graphic, so I've blurred it. But if you are interested in the video, you find it in the Telegram channel. And that BTR came to a halt inside of Sokil, so we know that the Russians managed to reach it. They clearly took losses while doing so. It's unclear what happened to the soldiers, whether they managed to occupy anything there, whether they were pushed out. Thus, the gray zone has to be extended. The Bradley was hit too, very likely, and there's a second video claiming to show that it was then abandoned by the Ukrainians. I'm not sure, and from what I've seen, it's a different recording. That should be a different M2 Bradley, even though I'm not sure because the quality of it isn't too great. Even though an impressive video of a close range spitting distance fight that was taken here at Sokil, but it proved that the Russians have now entered Sokil. They also straightened out the front line northeast of Novopokrovsk. Again, somewhat to be expected, no massive change here, and the same happened further south. Already in the Marinka region here in Krasnohorivka, it's now proven that they managed to take the buildings that were in the center of their two advances, which were still not under their control. They straightened the front line here, but that's it again. In Krasnohorivka, they still have serious trouble advancing further. Further south, I do not see any significant changes. There's some additional tree lines being occupied by the Russians in this area here at the very southeast, but that's it. And we go further to the west, and here in Uroshaine, the Russians have advanced further, roughly up till here. So they reached the river here. In this area, we have a geolocalization of this as well. And this is it here. A Russian attack advanced to here. You see Staromayorsk here and Uroshaine, but inside of the town itself, I do not see additional advances, but the Russian controllers probably advanced up till here. From the western regions, south of Orikhiv and from Krinky, no additional informations. It seems like the Ukrainians are still in Krinky, but as said in the past, I don't have much information here. And while we have some fighting being reported from the region here, I do not see any change in territory. So we switch to the Crimean Peninsula, and they're here in this region, or I think it was here. No, it was here. The Ukrainian military intelligence did a naval drone strike that hit a tugboat in here and sunk it. Now, to explain how big it is, I looked up the type, and this is it. It's a tugboat with a tonnage of 257 tons, a length of 29 meters. So it's not a massive ship, but it was sunk by the Ukrainians in this attack. There is also reports about a massive drone attack and probably cruise missile attack on the Crimean Peninsula from yesterday. I have not seen any serious reports about damages that I can report here, and it seems like the majority of the Russian fleet has left Novorossiysk. What happens to them, where they are sailing to, is unclear. Some of them, at least on satellite pictures, seem to be steaming towards the west, so back to Sevastopol or to the Crimean Peninsula, but as of yet it's not clear. They might theoretically be in front, move towards the Kerch Bridge to defend it. As said, right now we only seem to be somewhat certain that Novorossiysk was mostly abandoned by the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Overall, nothing has seriously changed. We still have to see if the Russians do an attack here from Belgorod in the Grai-Voron area, if there is an attack coming towards Sumy or Chernihiv, but as of now, nothing has changed here, and the overall situation also hasn't changed. We have information, though, in the sabotage area. The French have arrested a man in Paris that has both Ukrainian and Russian citizenship, and according to the French pro-Russian sentiments, they arrested him in Paris after he had injured himself by making explosives in his hotel room. No further details there whether it was proven in any detail that he wanted to sabotage something, but he was arrested after injuring himself. In troop generation, and this is the big news here, we have Putin admitting that the Russians have suffered serious losses. Let me quickly see if I can find it here, but I have made a screenshot. Yeah, it is this here. So this is, he claims that the Ukrainians have 50,000 losses a month. 50% of those are KIA, so he claims 25,000 Ukrainians are dead. As said in the past, I don't take those serious. I don't take either success claims serious, but claims of defeat. Admitting defeat is a whole different story. So while he claims that the Ukrainians suffer 25,000 KIA a month, he says at the same time that their ratio is 1 to about 5. So he admits that he says the Ukrainians suffer 25,000 KIA and they have 1/5 of it, basically admitting 5,000 KIA a month, which with addition to the wounded, which usually is roughly calculated at 1 to 3, would mean 20,000 casualties a month. This again is a the Russian side admitting to 20,000 losses a month, more or less, and this would fit perfectly into the claims of 500,000 lost by the Russians at the point of this war. So again, basically the Russians confirming how heavy their losses have been at the same time. The numbers, though, have to be put into some perspective, because Putin is saying that right now, to this point of this year, they've already recruited 160,000. This is more or less fitting, as the GOR said last year, that they are recruiting roughly 30,000 a month. So at the end of May, it would be 150,000, basically confirming Putin's number. The numbers there showed, as in the past, that the Russians do suffer heavy losses. We have the numbers to basically show us the range that the Western claims of 500,000 Russian losses are more or less in the ballpark where they are realistic. But at the same time, the Russians are recruiting more than they're currently losing, so they can keep filling up their own forces, and they can make sure that they even build moderate reserves at the same time. So this is the reality. On the other side, on the Ukrainian side, we have this here, and it's a member of parliament and the deputy head of the Committee for Human Rights, Deoccupation and Reintegration, and he's saying that the Ukrainians will likely recruit 120,000 this year. Now, we have 30,000 Russians a month, which adds up to 360,000, and he believes the Ukrainians will recruit 120,000 this year, 1/3. So unless the Ukrainians manage to achieve a 1-to-3 loss ratio towards the Russians, taking out 3 times as many as they themselves lose, which is not impossible, but also not too likely in the current situation of disparity of means. That means that this is a minimum. They have to achieve at least a 1-to-3 ratio to even keep a level playing field, to make sure that the situation is not worsening. If they don't manage it, it's getting worse despite them recruiting those. If they achieve more, then obviously their situation gets better. But this should show, if he's right with the total numbers, that it seems absurd to believe that the Ukrainians would do a serious counteroffensive in 2025. With 120,000 recruited this year, that seems out of the question, at least to what I can see in numbers. I don't think we'll see a serious Ukrainian counteroffensive if those recruitment numbers are anywhere close to the truth. In the political sphere, we have news about Russian gas exports. Gazprom is now at 1/3 of the original exports to Europe. And at the same time, the pipeline they built to China, we talked about it, I think, in the last situation report. They are negotiating with China, and China doesn't want to pay the prices. They actually want to pay subsidized prices. Basically, they demand that the Russians give them prices that they subsidize, that they sell them cheaper than anywhere else. This is currently causing problems in the pipeline construction and negotiations. But even if the pipelines, everything there goes as planned, it won't be able to make up for the losses. It will only be half of what the Russians have lost in Western Europe with their gas export. This obviously means that the income for Russian economy will be lower. And as the gas export, the income from this plays a huge role in the Russian budget, this will in the midterm cause problems for the Russian war economy as well. In international support, we have some news. The training for the F-16 pilots is too slow. Ukraine will only have a full squadron at the end of 2025 with the current speed. So 1.5 years from now, they will only have enough pilots for a full squadron. This is why it's great news what became public yesterday, that France is giving them Mirage 2000, as this means they will be able to train additional pilots, as France can't train F-16 pilots, but they can train Mirage 2000 pilots. France is also going to train a brigade, and according to some claims, wants to equip it as well. I have not seen a full confirmation of this. It seems likely, but I'm not 100% sure. And obviously, brigade isn't brigade. A tank brigade is something completely different than a static brigade, if you want to call it, or a motorized brigade. So we'll have to see what kind of equipment they're going to achieve. The US are sending another aid package with a size of $225 million US. It's going to include Hawk systems, so additional launchers, Stinger, manpads, HIMARS ammunition, 155 and 105 shells for the artillery systems. Apparently some additional howitzers as well. That should be M777. They are also going to include M113s, APCs, TOW, that's anti-tank guided missiles, Javelin, and 84, also all anti-tank weapons that are going to help Ukraine fairly soon. According to reports, Germany thinks about sending a 4th Patriot system. Now, Germany only had 12 to begin with, and this would mean they have handed over, should this happen, 1/3 of their whole air defense. I'm sorry for my American audience, but the US have sent 1 out of, I think, 60 systems so far, just to have a comparison of how much is being sent by other countries, whereas we know the claims in the US public are about 8 from different nations. Regardless, there's also reports that Germany will increase the IRIS-T production massively. Now, IRIS-T has proven to be a insanely successful air defense system, which will not only lead to more demand on the international markets, but obviously also inside of Ukraine. The orders from international buyers are adding up, and Ukraine wants every system that they can get. And we see, you can pause the video here, you can see the amount that is being added to the production capacity is massive, from a current 3 to 4 systems a year to 10 plus a year in just 2 years from now. For the missiles itself, from roughly 80 in 2022 to 800 to 1000 next year. So a massive increase of productions at the same time. And the German Bundestag has signed off on an order for 880 million euros for 155 millimeter shells. That I read that it's supposed to be 200,000 shells that are being bought here, and it's to fill up its own stocks and for Ukraine. So maybe another 100,000 155 shells being just ordered by the German government for Ukraine. At least that's a guesswork on this side. That was it from me already for now. If you enjoyed this situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment for the comment section. And before I forget it, I want to thank John Manson. Thank you so much for this book, Soldiers of Fortune, Mercenaries and Military Adventurers, 1960 to 2020, from Anthony Rogers. Thank you so much for sending me this book. If you also want to send me a book, you can find my Amazon wishlist in the description. That's one way of supporting me and of showing me your support and appreciation that I really, really love. So thank you everyone who supports this channel, either by this or by donations. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so by all the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.